on retailers providing dry cleaning services. Additionally, a fee is imposed on dry cleaner owners for the purchase or acquisition of dry cleaning solvent. The department may also impose an administrative penalty in an amount of not to exceed $500 for violations of the Act. The money that's collected under the current law is deposited into the Dry Cleaning Facility Release Trust Fund. After an owner pays a deductible of $5,000, an amount from the fund not to exceed $5 million can be used to pay costs for corrective actions at any contaminated dry cleaning site. However, the Secretary does have discretion to hold owners responsible for up to 100% of costs if the owner fails to report or respond to releases. The department is currently prohibited from seeking out contaminated dry cleaning facility sites. So under the bill, starting in section 1, most definitions would be updated for clarity with few substantive changes. One small change in the definition of immediate response to a release and the definition of reportable quantity. Those definitions would shift from applying only to releases in excess of specified quantities to those that meet or exceed those specified quantities. There's also a term that's defined in the middle of section 4. That's the definition of a contaminated dry cleaning site. That would now explicitly include surface water contamination. Concerning the administrative penalties, the administrative penalties for most violations of the Act would still result in the $500 per violation fee. However, the bill would impose penalties not to exceed $10,000 per violation of the surcharge and the tax requirements. For the surcharge, each month the violation continues would constitute a separate violation. For the tax portion, each day the violation continues would constitute a separate violation. So for one, it's each month, for the other, it's each day, and would be subject to additional fines. The restriction on actively seeking contaminated sites due to the presence of the fund would be retained. That would stay in place, but it would now clarify that sharing information, advertising the fund, and responding to complaints or water health concerns are permitted. The deductible for corrective action reimbursement would be increased from $5,000 to $10,000. So that's the amount the owner would have to pay before they would get access to the fund money. The fund cap of $5 million per site would remain, but now it would also apply to surface water that is contaminated with dry cleaning solvents. Additionally, the provision that allows the Secretary to determine that an owner is responsible for 100% of the costs of corrective action in certain cases would now also include a reference to operators, and that would match the reference to owners or operator in a subsequent paragraph. The environmental surcharge, gross receipts tax rate that is collected by the retailers would increase from 2.5% to 5%. Senate Bill 184 would become effective upon publication in the statute book. And if you have a copy of my brief, I included footnotes for locations of those different changes because it kind of bounces around a little bit. With that, I'd be happy to take any preliminary questions.
Any questions? I guess I have one. This applies to surface water and not groundwater.
I'd have to double check that. I thought its application was a bit more holistic with a reference being added to it applying to surface water now. I double check, the department will have a faster answer though.
Well, I'm aware of tetrachloroethylene contamination in groundwater dating back 1993, Scott County. And so I'm just trying to understand the parameters of this bill. As I read it, it says surface water.
So on page 7 of the bill, on line 27, it defines the term contaminated dry cleaning site, and that would mean aerial extent of soil, groundwater, or surface water contamination with dry cleaning solvents.
Okay, so that does include groundwater then. Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarification on that. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Kyle. Heather, can you give us a fiscal note on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fiscal note prepared by the Division of the Budget on the bill as introduced, KDHE and the Department of Revenue state enactment of the bill would increase annual revenue to the Dry Cleaning Facility Release Trust Fund by $613,000 to $710,000. The bill would increase the environmental surcharge in the form of a gross receipts tax for the privilege of engaging in the business of laundering and dry cleaning garments and other household fabrics from 2.5% to 5%. The deductible for corrective actions would also increase from $5,000 to $10,000. Revenues would be deposited to the Dry Cleaning Facility Release Trust Fund, and there would be no impact to the state general fund. KDHE states enactment of the bill would result in an overall net zero fiscal effect for the agency, and the Department of Revenue anticipates increased expenditures related to implementation of the bill that would total about $11,000, including administrative costs of about $3,000 and management report expenses of $8,000.
Any questions on the fiscal note? If not, thank you, Heather. We'll proceed to the first proponent I have listed would be Kate Gleason with KDHE.
Good morning, Chairman Nix and members of the committee. We are here today because this bill is important to the agency, and I appreciate Kyle and Heather's explanations. I think they covered a lot of the meat of the bill, but I'll just go into a little bit more of the agency's perspective on this. This committee has heard often about KDHE's efforts to remediate orphan contaminated sites because that has long been a water plan funding line for us. KDHE has 7 additional programs at least that do remediation based on different characteristics and funding sources of sites. This bill, of course, is an effort to improve funding for sites where the contamination is caused by dry cleaning. In those sites, there may or may not be a responsible party. Where there are responsible parties, we do try to work with them to get funding for those sites. There are 226 unresolved sites in the dry cleaning program. These sites result almost entirely from historical mismanagement of dry cleaning solvents. Before modern chemical management standards were put in place, solvents were often disposed of directly onto the ground behind the dry cleaning facility or into the sanitary sewer system where, because of cracks or what have you, they then leached into soil and groundwater. So the solvents move quickly through the soil to groundwater. They create long, thin plumes through groundwater. They move miles and miles with concentrations above human health risk standards. So that's why we're trying to address these sites. KDHE's dry cleaning program is funded through 4 mechanisms that feed into the trust fund, as Kyle described. First, each dry cleaning facility pays that $100 annually. We're not changing that with this bill. Second, there's a fee on solvents sold to dry cleaners that's paid by the distributors. That's not changing with this bill either. Third, there is the surcharge paid by consumers for dry cleaning services. The current rate is 2.5%, which is about 25 cents on every $10 of dry cleaning. This bill proposes to increase this to 5%, or about 50 cents on every $10 of dry cleaning. The fourth mechanism is that each applicant who wishes to take advantage of the trust fund for contamination remediation pays currently a deductible of $5,000. This bill proposes to double that to $10,000, which we think is a fair cost for the amount of liability relief that they get from entering into the trust fund. So KDHE is proposing those increases because of the large number of sites we have to address and declining revenues that we've seen as a result of lowered amounts of dry cleaning services used. At the height of revenue for this program, which was about 2006, we got about $1.4, $1.5 million. with the estimated increase from this bill, we'll go back up to about that amount. So we're not gaining ground really on revenue, but we're making up what we've lost from declining revenue. So a little bit of history here. We proposed this legislation in 2020. It did pass through the House committee and House as a whole before it languished because of the truncated session. Then last session in 2025, we introduced it to Senate Ag, and it passed Senate Ag, but it did not make it through before the session turnaround hit. Because of Chair Peck's efforts and the rest of Senate Ag, it did pass the Senate about a month ago. And so we're really hopeful that we can get it through this session, and third time's the charm, we can knock this one out and move on. I wanted to run through the changes a little bit, although Kyle covered them. Most are fairly minor, although I'm happy to answer questions if you see minor changes that are confusing, but I'll just hit some of the highlights. On page 3, KDHE had proposed originally to strike the $500 penalty. Sorry, I'm not turning to the correct page here. We wanted to tie that into penalties paid by other hazardous waste violations because solvents are a hazardous waste. Senate Ag struck that and put back in the original language. That's fine, I just want to explain why all of that text is there changed. On page 4, we also proposed to change language prohibiting us from seeking out dry cleaning sites. We didn't think that was necessary at this point. We have a pretty good handle on dry cleaning sites, and most of them are discovered because of exceedances found for other reasons. So we're not out looking for these sites anyway, but we proposed striking that. Senate Ag added it back in. We're fine with that also. On page 5, there's language that was struck that's no longer effective because the date has passed. It was about covering costs for corrective action that was incurred before this act was put in place, I think in 1993. So we don't have that anymore, so we struck that out. And then on page 7, those are where the changes are to the deductible and the surcharge near the bottom. Lines 30 down, the deductible is changed, and then you'll see very small on line 43, the most operative change here is the change from 2.5% to 5%. So I just want to point that out. It's tricky to find. Then pages 8 and 9, there's new language that's been added that allows revenue and KDHE to both take more proactive steps to collect surcharges that have not been properly reported by dry cleaners, which is another reason we think our revenue's been declining. They're not reporting the money that they should be paying, and revenue, it's no fault of theirs. It's very small potatoes to them, right? But this would allow KDHE to be a little bit more proactive in its work to get this money collected. On page 9, I'm sorry if I'm going through this quickly, but there was language struck on lines 32 through 34 that's also no longer effective. There was a graduated increase, and we've hit that $5.50 per gallon, so we don't need that language anymore. And then the last that I wanted to point out on page 10, there's the same language about revenue and KDHE seeking costs and assessing penalties for not paying. The first one on pages 8 and 9 had been about the surcharge, and this one is about the solvent fees, which we, again, have not changed those solvent fees, but this would allow us to go after distributors who are not adequately reporting and paying those solvent fees. So those are all the changes I had. We think this bill is very valuable to the agency and the state for getting some more of these dry cleaning sites off of our backlog, getting them addressed. They can have major effects for communities. Those of you from the Wichita area, I'm sure have heard about this. Hayesville, there's been dry cleaning sites that have affected a lot of folks across the state, and we would like to be able to address them in a more speedy and effective manner. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Any questions? Representative Vaughn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Kate. This is really interesting and seems like it addresses a lot of important issues in the underlying bill. So just to confirm, the 2.5% dry cleaning services rate paid by consumers and then the $5,000 deductible, were those set in 1993?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, that's a really long time ago. Seems like it's probably time for an update. And then once the if there is a contamination, once the dry cleaner pays the $10,000, they can receive up to $5 million or the value of whatever is in the fund in order to actually address the site, right? So it's a pretty good deal.
Correct. It's a great deal for folks who are trying to redevelop properties that have contamination from this. Often, because the dry cleaning industry has shrunk so much, the sites are trying to be redeveloped for new businesses. Those folks weren't there when the contamination was done, but nobody wants to buy and develop a property that has this type of liability associated with it. So the trust fund is there to allow that type of redevelopment of brownfield sites.
Okay, and then I was looking at the map in your testimony and the graph. So it looks like of the sites that you currently know about, there are over 220. Is that correct? Okay, yeah, that's a lot. All right, seems like a good bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further questions? Representative Helwig.
Thank you, Mr. That's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So you have money in the fund now, but we're trying to add a whole lot more money to the fund. But yet we have 200 and some odd sites. We still have money in the fund. So I'm trying to figure out the priority. Is KDHE not cleaning these up, or are you expecting the owner of the land to clean them up and they can tap into this fund? Explain this to me.
Once the applicant applies and is accepted into the trust fund, then KDHE takes on the work of cleaning up the site. The numbers here are not balances of the fund, those are annual revenues. So we receive currently about, I want to say $700,000 or $800,000 a year. That money is encumbered and spent every year. There is not money hanging out waiting to be spent at KDHE for this purpose. It's just that we have triaged the sites by potential risk to human health, and so we're addressing the ones with the highest human health risk first. And because of the limited funds, that work is just very slow.
I guess my other question is, this seems like it will hurt businesses by jacking the fees up, and so we can collect more money. I just, help me through this.
The idea, two things that maybe I should have mentioned earlier, is that we would like the industry that caused the contamination to bear some of the costs of addressing that contamination. Otherwise, this may become a state-funded liability spread across all taxpayers. The second thing is, there's not a one core group of dry cleaners for us to talk to, but we have talked to stakeholders, and I should have said that already. They understand the need for this, and they do support it. I mean, they're not excited to have more fees passed along to consumers, but they enjoy also the liability protections that they receive here and the progress that this makes for the contamination site. So we have talked to folks in industry about it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Representative Helwig may have kind of alluded to this, asked about this, but why can't the property owners or the business owners do some of the work of cleaning up their own property?
They could, if they wanted to, they would be a voluntary party doing the work. Under the current statutes, KDHE does not have authority to order folks to clean up contamination they didn't cause, right? If that were the law in Kansas, for us to say, well, you own the property, so you clean it up, even though you didn't cause it, that would really stymie redevelopment. Folks aren't going to buy those properties. They're not going to want to redevelop them. They'll just languish as abandoned or, unproductive pieces of land and property. So those were the policy decisions that I wasn't there in 1993, but those are the policy decisions that led to the trust fund.
Representative Blex, and then Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kate, for your testimony. Do you know, do a lot of the business owners, is there a liability insurance, and do they carry that, or is that something that's limited, or are they self-insured? Do you have any idea on that for contamination of these types?
Yeah, environmental insurance does exist. It does not cover things that you didn't do or were done in the past. So the same as like a health insurance, where they're not going to say, oh, you broke your leg a year ago and now you can sign up and get it fixed. The insurance won't date back and cover that. And the companies most of the companies that cause this contamination no longer exist, so there's no insurance to go back to.
Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. Could you play out for us what could happen over, I don't know, let's say a 20 or 30-year timeline if we did not raise these fees?
We would expect that the trust fund revenues would either stagnate or decline. It's unlikely that they're going to rise at this point unless we see a resurgence in the popularity of dry cleaning. Because of rising costs that we all are experiencing, right? Our costs for hiring folks and getting this work done are not going down. We will be able to remediate fewer and fewer of these, probably to the point where we're only addressing emergency situations. $600,000 or $700,000 a year is not enough to address one site probably. So we will be looking at just, I would say in 20 years, if we did that, we would just be looking at providing alternate water sources to people who are affected and not ever probably even getting to remediation of any sites. Or we may be, as an agency, asking for funding in other ways.
I have a question, and then we'll go to Representative Pishney. I alluded to something in 1993. About that time, counties were put in charge of landfills. And in some communities, landfills that had been run by cities for years all of a sudden became county operations. The one I'm thinking of traded an airport for a landfill. The city wound up operating the airport the county had been doing, and the county wound up operating the landfill. That landfill had a barrel of tetrachloroethylene that was leaking down into the groundwater. And that county, over the next 10 or 15 years, spent a lot of money putting down inspection wells to determine what the plume from that tetrachloroethylene had moved within our underground water source. This bill, in my opinion, the way it looks, and that's a long time ago, 93, we're talking 33 years now. I believe this bill in some ways addresses the initial cause of some of these things and doesn't pass it on to others down the road. The county taxpayers wound up putting those wells down in 93, 4, and for the next 10 or 15 years after. I'm a firm believer in accountability. Those industries that deal in chemicals like this need to be responsible for their proper disposal. Prior to 93, there weren't that many laws on this. And things happened that shouldn't have happened then, and that's why we have cleanup sites. In Butler County, we were dealing with oil floating on a water table that affected some residents. If we'd had personal accountability back in the 1915s and 20s, that wouldn't have happened. So I'm a believer in some of these preventative things, and I can get into a lot more detail on this because I was deeply involved with dealing with KDHE during that time period and a couple of years prior to that. Just to kind of put this in one perspective. So, Representative Pishney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Kate, for presenting. The chair comments about accountability and mentioning landfill, and we have a bill here about dry cleaning, are a good segue to the question I want to ask. And this is basically to understand. I have a belief that we need to try to do things as globally as possible when it affects a lot of people, and public health affects a lot of people. My question is this, why are we singling out dry cleaning in this bill? Because we have contamination, as was referenced with landfill and so forth with other things. Is there a reason that this is being segregated? And I'm not criticizing, I'm trying to be educated, from other contamination sources as an issue. Help me understand that.
That's a great question. That does give me an opportunity to say something I also probably should have said earlier, is that this trust fund was put in place in 1995, not 1993. I realized I said the wrong year, to protect folks from federal liability when these Superfund sites, when these dry cleaning sites started popping up, there was a real fear that it would lead to cities or areas being named as Superfund sites and referred to EPA. And so this trust fund was created just historically to address that one specific issue. And it has sort of always, each contaminated site has been like putting out a fire, right? So we have a program that runs our federal facilities, contaminated sites. We have a program that runs our storage tanks, sites for petroleum. We have this one for dry cleaning. And I think the reason they're all separate is because we have tried as an agency and a state to attribute those costs to the people responsible for the contamination or the industry responsible for the contamination. So the legislature has given us as an agency funding lines related to those sources of contamination, and they have done that in sort of a piecemeal way. So we're working within the statutes and the regulations that we've been given, and this is just sort of how it's pieced out. It also is, from an administrative perspective, it works for us because we're able to, we can't have all of our staff doing everything, so we have folks who are specializing in different areas, and that allows them to be more efficient and effective with the sites that they're working on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One follow-up comment. I respect what you just said, and I understand specialization, if you will. I'm still concerned that we have all these carve-outs, although I hear what you're saying. But to me, contamination is contamination, and I go back to something the chair said. I do believe in accountability. I do believe who caused the contamination needs to be responsible for cleanup of the contamination rather than the next party. The penalty needs to stay with the company that caused it, not go to the next company that's trying to do something positive. So I just wanted to make it clear on what my belief is with regard to that. Thank you.
Representative Simmons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. During your presentation and your comments, I was thinking about Superfund sites, and I learned a number of years ago about the relationship between childhood development and proximity to Superfund sites. And it's something like within 1 mile, 2 miles, 10 miles as it goes, you can have amazing predictors of a child's life outcome based on how closely they live to a Superfund site. And at the time that I was studying that, dry cleaning was, of course, a consideration, and the chemicals that came from that. So I really appreciate you including that in the presentation, because I think it certainly connects the importance of this to our long-term outcome as a state and our communities, because obviously you have to spend money to address problems like crime or lower education or less civic participation that have been proven to come from these Superfund sites. So I see it very much as an investment. Thank you.
Any further questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kind of building on the last comment, I do, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I also saw recent research linking the presence of dry cleaning solvents to Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative diseases. I don't know if that's correct, but I guess I was wondering, could you share a little bit about your knowledge on the human health effects of, I guess, exposure to these types of chemicals in the community?
My area of expertise, so let me bring someone up.
Hi, Joseph Nolan, KDHE. Thank you very much, committee, for your time. To answer your question, yes, there has been a lot of recent links. Before the current federal administration, the EPA was working on reclassifying PERC, tetrachloroethylene, to a higher status of hazardous material because of the link to that. So that's one of the problems that I've seen around like federal facilities, for example, Army bases. Those contaminants have caused some problems at those locations of folks with a higher incident rate of Parkinson's disease. So yes, that is correct. And may I address his question a little bit? Oh, I'm sorry.
Please do.
Yeah, to answer your question, one of the reasons this was created was to help dry cleaning industry as well. The dry cleaning industry is not a high profit industry. These folks aren't making millions of dollars a year, and unfortunately, $1,000 machine that's $1,000 profit wash can turn into millions of dollars of contamination. It's very expensive to address these sites just because of the sheer size that they are and how far that they can travel underground. So for example, mobile tools in Wichita are 3 and 4 mile long sites. They're quite large. So this isn't something we can go out and just kind of excavate everything. It takes a very advanced system to pull this stuff from underneath the groundwater real deep. They usually cost $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 to install, and then a few $1,000s to operate. Well, asking a dry cleaner to pay $300,000 or $400,000 probably means they're not going to be able to afford it. They're going to go out of business. So it is protective to them as well, and the current industry if something does happen, just because of the low revenue of their services. So.
Any further questions? I guess I need to say that we ask these questions so that we can understand this bill. Overall, we appreciate the protection of our groundwater, surface water, whatever, that you guys provide for us. I think Kate alluded to many of these things have happened long, distant past, and it's difficult to try to clean up something if you don't know where the source was and all that going on. But from this point forward, we can do a better job with our management of these things, and I appreciate the efforts that you guys take to keep our water of the state of Kansas as pure and clean as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kate, do you have anything else?
No, I appreciate your time and attention to this, and if you need anything else from me, you know where to find me.
Okay. Are there any other proponents? Are there any opponents? I see on my list we have a written only opponent, John Mazur, the Director of Membership of Dry Cleaning and Laundry Institute. I think that's in your folder. That was emailed to us. Are there any neutrals? Seeing none, we will close the hearing on Senate Bill 184, and I'll tell the committee, I'm sorry. Okay, would you like to come to the microphone?
I'm sorry. My name's Chris Nelson. I'm with I Need a Cleaners in Hutchinson. And John Neal, who I purchased the business from, he was the one that started this bill in '95. And it was kind of a cooperative with KDHE and other dry cleaners around the state. I'm here to respectfully oppose the increase in the environmental tax to 5%. The original environmental fund was initiated with involvement and cooperation with dry cleaning industry. However, when efforts were made to increase this tax, dry cleaners were not properly notified or given meaningful opportunity for input. For a tax that directly impacts our industry, the lack of communication is deeply concerning for us. Our industry has not recovered from the economic impact of COVID-19. More than 30% of dry cleaners in the United States have closed permanently during this pandemic. Kansas business continues to face reduced customer demand, increased labor costs, rising utility rates, and higher supplies and expenses. Many of us are operating on an extremely thin margin to remain open. Doubling this environmental tax at the time would further strain already fragile small businesses, discourage investment and growth in dry cleaning, potentially force additional closures, and reduce employment in local communities. Additional increase in this tax may accelerate the shift towards wet cleaning, which means we would use water to dry clean. They have that now, and so we would not be under the fund on that. If traditional dry cleaning operations decline significantly or close, the environmental fund itself will lose its revenue base. In effect, the proposed increase could undermine the long-term Kansas dry clean and small business, locally owned, that serve our communities and provide transparent and economic realistic. I respectfully urge you to oppose the 5% tax increase and engage directly with dry cleaners before moving forward to change. We want to be stewards of our industry and help, and our industry has changed since '95 when John started this bill. Dry clean machines are a close couple to put in PERC, not to mention PERC has diminished in our state. I don't even know, probably a handful of businesses that use perchloroethylene. So we're happy to meet with KDHE and help and be stewards for this industry. I mean, we can come up with ideas as maybe a higher fines or a bigger deductible, but moving this to 5% could kill our industry. That's how fragile we are right now. So I appreciate your time.
Questions? Representative Vaughn? Would you stand for questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. I guess it was my understanding the surcharge is passed on to the consumer. So are you worried that a 2.5% increase in the surcharge will dissuade customers from using your dry cleaning services?
We think that that will happen. We're at a high price right now for dry cleaning pants. We go from $8 to $15 for a pair of pants. So increasing that 2.5% over the year makes a big difference for us.
I mean, it hasn't been increased since 1995, so I think it makes sense to address it in some way. Is there an amount that you think would be more reasonable, or that's just something you don't want to see change?
No, I think that we can come up with an idea as far as the price of tax on the PERC, if people are still using that, or the deductible for the fund to get your site cleaned up. You know, most of this stuff is not even from dry cleaners today, which I know you understand. We're happy to help out on those cleanups. We want to see those sites cleaned up, and we're happy to do our part. What I'm saying is right now, doubling that tax will hurt our business.
Thank you.
Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your testimony. And you kind of answered one question I had was, you know, on the deductible. You are really right now against a day-to-day increase in cost. And I think you really make a good point. Most of those are sins of the past that you're being asked to fund, pass on to us as current consumers of getting dry cleaning. And I don't know, maybe it's a dual question to KDHE. Have they explored the fact that what kind of a deductible, and you don't seem to be opposed too much to the 10,000, that might even be negotiable. And, you know, what it would take to sustain that fund if they, you know, the balance between increasing this, but it does seem like a lot. And I appreciate that comment. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. That's a little bit outside of our normal procedure for this committee. We normally ask for testimony to be provided 24 hours in advance. And since I did that, I want to give the opponent or the proponent side an opportunity to respond. I don't always do this, but I did take that testimony, so I want to give fair to the other side. Go ahead, Ms. Gleason.
I appreciate that, Chairman Nix. We have tried to, well, I will say this legislation has developed, as you heard, over many years, and there was a lot of consultation with the industry over those years. That may have not reached every dry cleaner in the state, and I apologize if dry cleaners feel like this is a surprise bill, but we've been working it since 2020, so we have tried to reach out in the ways that we've been able to. And this rate increase is carefully considered by the agency. We do think this is the best path forward for funding the trust fund The deductibles, you know, we've got 226 on our ledger now. Those folks have already paid the $5,000 deductible. So increases to the deductible, we think, are fair for future applicants, but we don't anticipate that being a major source of revenue. In fact, we just put that increase in there as a fairness issue. The main source, the bulk of money we collect for the trust fund is from the surcharge. So if there's no increase to the surcharge, there will be a very negligible increase to the overall trust fund, and we will be at square one where we are with the balance of the trust fund. So that's all I wanted to.
Representative Pishney?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and for lack of a better phrase, I want to play devil's advocate here for a second, because if the percentage is left at 2.5%, it sounds to me like in our written testimony, the opponent testimony as well as the verbal, that some of the dry cleaners might be able to stay in business longer. But with the 5%, we might drive out a few of the dry cleaners. So are we not hurting ourselves on one side, trying to help ourselves by increasing the fees? Because if we have less people paying in at 5%, might it not come back to the number of companies we have today at 2.5%? And I know I'm talking theoretical, I don't have numbers, but it just seems like we might be counterproductive.
This is high-level economics that we might need an economist to answer. The increase, again, is 25 cents on every $10. So we have tried to keep it small so that it doesn't affect the consumer that much. But obviously, it's an increase, but we've tried to keep it as small as possible in a way that we think sustains the program, right? If we're going to address 226 sites, the agency obviously needs more than $1.4 million a year, but we've asked for the smallest increase that we think will allow us to address some of them and keep that number moving down instead of going, it's continuing to rise right now. So we're trying to do something and do the least that we can and hopefully not, create those negative consequences for the industry.
And just one follow-up, Mr. Chair. I equate it to the tax questions that we're being asked in each chamber right now. And we narrow the base of taxpayers, and so we wonder why we don't have the revenue. And that's the point of my conversation here with dry cleaners. If we narrow that base that are paying in 5%, we might not be any better off as far as revenue coming to KDHE. So that, I'm not asking for a response, but that's the context of my question, or my comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Drogi's next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a sort of a two-part question. What's the average transaction fee for a laundromat? I don't have to have that answer really, but if it's $30, that's $1.50 that's being added to this bill. And my interpretation is that with inflation and most of the people using dry cleaning are probably not digging ditches. They're having a better paying job. So $1.50 on a $30 transaction, if that, I can't see how that's going to really harm, and it's passed on from the business to the end user. So I don't see how that's going to be that difficult to deal with. Thank you.
Just to jump in, the increase would be 75 cents. So currently on $30, they would be paying 75 cents. And this would add that. That would increase that.
Yes, $1.50 total.
Yeah, total.
Representative Featherston?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you have any process whereby you can go find the people who created the contamination and get them to help out or compel them to help out?
We do have a responsible party identification process where folks do research. They go to, county libraries. They look for old records. These folks are gone. Where we do have responsible parties, we have identified them, and we do ask them to contribute. So that is done. It's just not possible for dry cleaning. And of course, we've been doing this since 1995, so we've had time to look at all the known sites. If there's new ones in the future, that work would be done at that time.
Representative Helwig?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to something that's just bugging me from your earlier testimony. So these are all old sites, contaminations 10, 20 years ago. So do we not, we're not having any new contamination in the last 10, 15 years because now we handle the chemicals correctly? So this would just, it would be a time thing before we could get to all these sites, or help me with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The chemical management really changed in the 70s, right? A lot of environmental laws were put in place that improved housekeeping. So that's not to say there aren't spills or releases from dry cleaners that have happened since then, but there are that is a lower percentage of this than you would probably even guess. I think we maybe get one every few years of a new spill, and because of those management practices, they report those quicker, we get the soil moved, we can address them in a more cost-effective way, and we can prevent the $1 million of 3 to 4 mile plumes that are happening underground. So yes, it is mostly historical contamination. The list could go up because we might not know about all of them, right? The agency is restricted in what it can do to look for these sites. We think we're rounding the bend on identifying dry cleaning sites, hopefully. So yeah, the idea here would be that the money is used to decrease that backlog and have that ledger go down, much like our orphan sites.
I'll switch back to representative beside me here, his comment about the 2.5% to 5%. So if we're going from $8 a pair of pants to 15, wouldn't that be collecting more taxes anyway at 2.5% just because of the rise in the cost of the service?
Yes, yeah, that's good math. The fund is still going down because of the decrease in the amount of dry cleaning that's done.
So we're trying, Mr. Chair, so because business is dwindling now, we're trying to ask them to pay more.
We're not asking because business is dwindling, but that is, yeah, an inherent tie that we have, right? The less dry cleaning that's done, the less money we collect. So it is a tricky proposition. I understand folks' reticence to add costs to this industry. We think this is a low add, and you know, although if you were dry cleaning pants at $8 before and now it's $12, you're going to get a little bit more. You're going to get like, we would get $4, so like 12 cents more. This just increases that a little bit more to allow us to address these sites. So it's just economics. We don't know as an agency who else, you know, where else to get this money. We have these sites, and who do these costs go to?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Blacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is getting tougher. I have 35 years of passionate conservation work, and I had the opportunity to tour in a leadership class, 208 or something like that, a long time ago, at Hayes, and seen the impacts of the monitoring wells out there that dry cleaners had done. But the more I'm hearing, we need to do a little better job, I think, rather than just setting a day-to-day fee that's going to increase the cost of doing business. I have to remind my wife, I bought these Levi's, wore since I was 13. Not these, for $8 at John Sports Center, and just happened to be my size. Had them on special. They was button fronts, and then that's getting a little more difficult as I age. Anyhow, $8, I've got more than probably $80 in dry cleaning and $8 a pop to have these cleaned, and a little bit of a starch in them. And, you know, it's starting to bother me. If that goes to 15, I appreciate the opponent's testimony, then that's impacting. And, you know, when I first walked into this committee room, this was an automatic yes. It's not now, because I think what we're doing is we need to find some other source, I don't know where it's at, to clean these up, but we're punishing the people that's trying to make a living in today's business. And I know the contamination is real. I mean, I've seen that, and I agree 100% with having to get it cleaned up. But to put this kind of an increase on, you know, mom and pop operations, and right now, most all of them, I've got one place that I take my jeans to, and then they haul them to Bartlesville, Oklahoma to get them done. So we're limited. We're used to be 5 or 6 of these. And if the chemical issues has gone away and we're not having a whole lot of recent, and I understand having a fund there and I support the 10,000, but Mr. Chair, I don't know, in committee, I'm going to, you know, this is going to be a tough vote for me, but, you know, what we're doing to the mom and pops on a day-to-day things, I may very well be a no on this. Thank you.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we get a clarification from Mr. Nelson? Do you mean the cost has gone from it used to be $8 to now it's 15? Or do you mean the range currently for cleaning of pair of hands is between $8 and $15? Thank you.
That would change from 8 to 12 to 824 to 1236, if my math is close on 3%. Representative Cywert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is really fascinating on this, and I can remember when there's a lot of filling stations that are vacant, a lot of dry cleaning places that are vacant. My question is, how does this get into the ground when we've been monitoring it for so long? Why does it keep being a problem? How does that get in the groundwater contamination?
How did the dry cleaning solvents get into the groundwater? They just move through the soil. They're heavier than.
But are they not, do they not capture them, or we just dump it on the ground?
Historically, it was dumped on the ground frequently or poured into the sanitary sewer.
Okay, I got that after the 70s when we got all these closed ones, but why are we still having that problem? Did we not learn, did government not enforce these rules?
Since the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act was put in place, I think in 1973, which is the act regulating hazardous waste, those practices were cleaned up. Of course, there are always bad actors or accidents, but largely since that time, we have not had the same problems that we used to have historically.
Okay, so what you're saying is most of this contamination is still coming from the 70s then?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Simmons, we're about to end our time here.
Thank you for indulging me, Mr. Chair. I think this is a really fascinating bill and a fascinating discussion. I feel to some degree there should be accountability on the consumer. I use a dry cleaner, and I know that the process of dry cleaning is not great for the environment, and I think that a bit of accountability on the consumer is not a bad thing at all in this. I also concur with Dr. Drogi's earlier comments that those utilizing dry cleaning are probably not super likely to notice a 2.5% addition to their final bill. And my final comment is, if we're concerned that this is going to wreck the entire dry cleaning industry in Kansas, this 2.5% surcharge, I think there's a lot more to take into consideration than simply a 2.5% surcharge. I cannot imagine that this bill would completely destroy an industry, but that's my understanding of capitalism. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I think we've discussed this quite thoroughly. Want to thank all the presenters today, and I will close the hearing on Senate Bill 184. I intend to work this bill a week from today. If you have amendments or anything that you'd like to bring forward, we'll discuss it on Tuesday of next week. Also have, what is it, Tony, Senate Bill 317, I believe, coming over from the Senate that we will work next Tuesday. And after that bill, we hope to take final action on that the Thursday after. I do have a couple of people here from Randolph, Kansas. Eric and Bruce, are you here? Would you please come forward? These folks want to tell us what can be, or what the 2302 bill that we did 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago now, has done within their community. Proceed, guys. Tell us your names and your testimony.
Awesome. Well, my name's Eric Nielsen. I own real estate company, United Country, Milestone Realty and Development. I've got offices in Manhattan, Salina, and in Hayes, and so sit inside of a lot of your different areas. And
I'm Bruce Zimmer. I'm the mayor of Randolph.
yeah, and so I actually called Chair here yesterday. I was just actually calling to thank him a little bit for the bill and do some things that you all maybe don't hear as much, which is actually tell you how much we appreciate how some of the legislation you've put through has actually directly impacted communities. And so a lot of what I do, so I'm also the president of the Kansas chapter of the Real Estate Land Institute, which is basically the land side of the National Association of Realtors. And so in that, I deal a lot with rural communities. And one of the things that I've been dealing with a lot is trying to figure out how to allow people to stay where they want to stay for as long as they want to be there. And that would be high school students as they're graduating, but it'd also be seniors or olders as they're getting up in age. And so that's led me into a lot of rural communities, working with things, looking at senior care, health care, things along those lines, the daily pieces. But the other thing is looking a lot at our rural housing, especially in our smaller communities. And so, I grew up in Randolph. I was blessed enough that my farm went under my senior year of high school, so I had to figure out something else to do. So I ended up in college and a bunch of other places before coming back. But one of the things that's coming back, we've been working on a growth spectrum within the city. Your rural communities, I know a lot of you actually have them in your districts. You have smaller communities and you have ones that are trying to grow, trying to stay. You usually run into two reasons why we lose a lot of our populations. Part of it is the inability or the non-desire to change. You get, older farmers like my father, and probably where I'll be when I'm an older farmer too, just not wanting to see that change. But a larger portion is the inability to bring in outside workforce, to bring in outside housing options for people to live in, because there's not an ability to find that infrastructure or those other incentive packages to bring people in. So when you look at our rural communities, so I do a lot of stuff with larger communities because that's where I get a larger portion of what I do. So the rural community side for me is a kind of my passion project to be figuring out. And we don't have the ability to do special assessments. I think when I showed up in Randolph in 2018 to say, hey, let's start looking at this housing on the south side of town. If you don't know the history of Randolph, it's part of the dam project that came through in Tuttle Creek actually wiped out the original town of Randolph that was there. It was raised and leveled, and they moved the city over to an 80-acre parcel they were given. At that time, Randolph had 40 commercial businesses in it. It had about 460 residents, was in a growth structure along a highway. But it also had some flooding issues occasionally. Bruce is a lifetime person from the Randolph area, so family there. But in that, when Randolph moved, it actually only took one commercial business left after the end of all the fighting they did to work against. We ended up with the IGA, a grocer that was there at the time, and a couple other rural community businesses that came, and then a smaller community. And since then, Randolph had a portion of ground behind it that was bought by the Randolph Annexation Company, and a lot of communities have this, where community members will buy existing ground adjacent to them to look for future expansion. The problem for Randolph has been, is since that time, up until we brought a different developer in to look at it, there wasn't actually even an ability to do that. KHRC has done some great programs here in the state, Rural Housing Incentive Districts, RHIDs, which is basically a TIF district for smaller communities, WI or MIH, KHITC. I mean, you can look at all these different incentive programs. They're highly competitive, and they're for communities that are 55,000 or larger. The thing that you all did with this bill that has impacted us greatly, and I think is one of the crowning achievements I've seen in a lot of things, is that with your impact being communities of 2,000 or less, it actually put it in place. We've applied for base grants. We applied 3 years in a row for MIH, KHITC. Our county won't actually allow us to do RHID programs. The adjacent county where we did do one, after we did the first one, it worked really well, decided they no longer wanted to allow us to do them either. So running into that, this was the first program that showed up. And so we actually were a recipient of the technical grant 2 years ago. And so we've finished all of our engineering. And we're now in the process right now, we're in the application pool for the actual infrastructure grant. But the reason for today was we just really, like I said, I was calling to individually thank him. He said, well, why don't you show up at the committee? So just wanted to let you all know the importance of what you're doing, especially in things that can be impactful into the smaller rural communities. Without it, there is not a possibility. I build houses, I do developments, I work with large cities and small cities to do them. When you have the ability to do this, it changes the ability for people to build houses. Because if you're trying to tie infrastructure into the housing price, the house won't appraise, and you won't be able to incite other groups to come in. So as we've been missing on all these other grant proposals that we put together, we're actually missing on businesses. We've had companies who want to come to our community, but they can't because we don't have housing available. Our housing, our average day on market is under 2 weeks on a house that shows up. Our school district is constantly asking us, can you build houses? We have the community asking us. We have the town council and the mayor asking us. We have businesses who have looked at Randolph. It's located, it's a small town. You probably have no idea where it is, about 20 minutes north of Manhattan. Some of you have an idea. But the town of Randolph actually services so much to the point where the Chamber of Commerce and the city of Manhattan are actually backing us on what we've submitted because, in my opinion, when we look at some of our rural communities with our proximity to our larger metro areas, actually provide that workforce housing. If you're in other committees, you probably hear that tagline a lot. And that, for me, is what you can get out of your rural environments, is you can actually find a place, and the Chamber of Commerce, like I said, for Manhattan has proposed this too. We can provide housing in rural communities, and we can provide the education in those rural communities and environments that people desire to be in. And so far, you know, like I said, we have the technical assistance grant. Right now, we're on the infrastructure side. City of Randolph, much like a lot of other rural communities, we have a water spike there. We're losing, what you say, 100,000 gallons a month?
100,000 a month right now. And we cannot find it. We've had people come up and we found one little leak. That's all we found. Yeah. But, and Randolph is one of those communities to where all the northern part of the county, we're the place where all the rural fire department comes for water. We supply all the water for the rural areas. So with the infrastructure that we need, that would surpass so much more. But we just, we need your help.
Yeah. And so I think, you know, like I said, we're working right now. We'll see how the application pool works out on this one. But I think the big thing I'd push at you is when you do look at this grant that you all put together, the two parts of it, one being the infrastructure side and the other actually being the technical assistance. One thing I would propose that I'm hopeful in, but when you do look at that technical assistance, and we made this pretty clear when we even received it, was do not hand us that money if we're not going to get the other side, because I don't like to waste dollars. And that's one of the things that I would just tell you might need to be looked at on this, is just how does that continuation happen from that technical assistance side? Because, I mean, we've been shovel ready on 50 houses for 6 years, looking for projects to put them in. And
we've lost a lot of business because we've, the infrastructure. Yeah. Just can't support it.
And my guess is you have a lot of rural communities there in that same bucket. Like I said, I can think from the other places where I have my offices, Hayes being a specific one with some of the groups we've worked with around that area. So anyways, the main portion was, like I said, I actually was just calling it, I had researched to figure out where the bill had actually came out of. Found the committee, found the people who put it together, and I was just going to start calling yesterday, and first phone call, he said, why don't you show up? So I appreciate that, and yeah, just honestly, we just really wanted to let you know it works. I know last year there was 218 million was asked, and I think you funded 28. So I think there's a lot more need than there probably is dollars sitting in it. But whatever you can do to keep those dollars in it, we can't compete. A lot of your rural communities will tell you this. It is really hard to compete when you're under 2,000, when every single grant process out there asks for an impact. Well, that impact, when you're sitting there at a town of, you know, less than 2,000 or less than 1,000 even, that impact piece of that grant program gets you thrown out pretty quick compared to when your competition is, like I said, RHID is a competition of 55,000 or less, and it's actually been opened up to larger groups, MIH, KHITC, all those things. So that means our competition is Salina, Manhattan, larger Hutch, regional pieces. We're not going to show an impact for that, but rural communities are not only resilient, I truly think they are a growth process for our state if we utilize them correctly on how we go. So
It's to the point, either we grow or we die. So, and I don't want to see our town die. I've been on the city council since 1982. So I've been there a while, so we've done a lot of improvements, and it's a struggle. We've got the same problems as Topeka does, only on smaller portions. So.
can't do a special
stretches a
assessment.
long way.
Yep.
Any questions for these fellows? Representative Pishney?
Thank you. You got that right. Not a question, but I want to make a comment because Representative White thinks I'm an old guy, and I want to put this in context. I was a kid growing up on a farm at Waterville when Randolph was moved because of the dam. So that just to help you out, Representative White, I just wanted you to know that. So I know the entire history about that, and I applaud the small communities. I will say one thing about the RHID. Out in Finney County, where I am located, Garden City, the city was eligible for RHID, and then we had a housing development wanted to start in the county, but the county was not eligible until right after he annexed into the city. So, but now the county and the city are eligible for RHID. So there's been some positive movement with regard to that, but it does create more competition, as he just alluded to. Thank you for that latitude, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you both for being here. I think it's really great to hear local stories about how 2302, which I think has really been, I mean, it's been a new initiative, but there's been a lot of support on both sides and wanting to help people across the state. So it's great to hear local testimonies about how it's made a change in your community. So thank you for being here. Thank you. And the chair mentioned this, but there is a bill I think we're going to hear next week, 317, that would be making changes to the 2302 grant fund. So as a community that's been impacted by this, if you were inclined, you may take a look at it and see if you wanted to submit testimony on that based on how it would impact your community. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you guys for coming today. I appreciate your story. This is the group that needed to hear it. We were talking as I was driving down I-70, but thank you for calling. All right, we are adjourned. I don't think we have anything up. If we hear this bill that we did a hearing on earlier, if we work it on Tuesday, we don't really need to meet on Thursday of this week, folks. We'll hit it again next week and try to clean up the two bills. Representative Droege.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, that enlightening information we just had, if those monthly magazines we get from water, don't we all get those? So if you look at the front of that, there's a water tower on the front of it that says Hamilton. That's in District 13, and it saved that town to have that water, to have the help to fix the pipe that fills and empties the towers is insulated, and they found these cracks, and the pipe was leaking, and then they found the insulation was bad, and so they wouldn't have been able to survive another winter with it, and it saved the town, and they're all very grateful.
Well, the story you just heard is replicated 100 and a little more times across the state of Kansas in a lot of these communities. So I just want to applaud this committee for some of the good work we've done, and we'll keep moving forward. Seeing nothing else, we are adjourned. We will meet again next Tuesday. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Tony. We'll take it up on Tuesday of next week, give everybody an opportunity, and we'll also take testimony on Senate Bill 317. Okay? Go ahead, Gary.